Welcome to episode 4 of Everyone Else Has a Podcast with JD Swilly and Scott Asher.
Hi.
And if you were watching episode 3, you saw that we had on a special guest, Dan Scott, with us.
Yeah.
And we talked and we talked and we talked and we talked. So much so that we decided to cut that conversation into 2 and make it 2 episodes. And so that's what we're about to jump into here in just a moment. Scott, you want to give us any kind of recap of, I don't know where we're going to be jumping in.
It's going to be hard to recap where because we don't know where we stopped. We have to try to find a good stopping place. But if you didn't get all the stuff on charity, it's something that you should listen to. And I'm pretty sure that's in the second half.
Yeah,
it's being charitable.
probably.
And what does that even mean? It seems kind of like almost a lost art.
It has nothing to do with Goodwill or
donating
thrift
money
stores
or anything like that. It's just about an attitude, a good attitude to have for us as Christians, and then for people who are not Christians too. Why not be charitable? You know, we can be moral. We can be moral without necessarily believing the exact same things as JD and I, but being charitable, it's good stuff.
It is. So we hope you enjoy the rest of this conversation that we had with Dan. And it's almost weird for me a little bit to say Dan, because I normally have always known him as Pastor Dan, because he I'll introduce him here right now, because if you're catching up into the middle of this and you're just watching this, part 2 of this conversation, you're like, well, who is this guy? Dan Scott was pastoring churches for decades, and his last tenure was at Christ Church in Nashville, of which I was on staff and served under his leadership for a period of time. And so I call him pastor, and still to this day I call him pastor, not just out of respect, because that's kind of one of the roles that he plays in my life. He's a friend, but not like you and I are friends. We're like, brother, buddy
We're
friends.
friends without the respect.
Right, exactly. That's the exact way I would put it.
That's how it works.
But Dan also serves as, and we didn't talk about this in the first episode, but he also serves as one of the overseers of the church that I lead in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And so, which means, I'm actually kind of, I report to him. He's one of the three people
This was
that
your one-on-one.
Yeah.
He had to evaluate you.
to do
He
what?
took notes. He evaluated
Yeah.
you. He's the overseer. He was like, all right, let's see how this is going.
Yeah,
They have a podcast. Let's find out if he's saying crazy stuff.
Yeah, that was good for him.
You passed, I think.
Hopefully it'll be good for me.
He smiled at the end.
I let
so
him talk mostly, so I was trying to pass that test by letting him talk mostly.
That's what you do with bosses.
Yeah. So, but Dan also has his doctorate of divinity. Has other master's degrees. Right now, he's currently doing some interim pastoral work, but also he's doing a lot of counseling at a counseling center here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I have a lot of respect for him. He's one of the smartest people that I know. He is one of the most charitable people I know.
Yeah,
as
that
well.
really comes out. I had never met him before, but it comes out really well. I was watching some of his Facebook videos yesterday, and he just comes at it. You can tell what kind of heart he has. It's a very kind, thoughtful heart, someone who's looking out for the people that are listening. So some clear area to improve in our lives. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I just looking at him like, wow, I'm not there. That'd be good to have that. You know what I mean?
You're on your way.
Well, no, I mean, he's way ahead, but he's just very caring and
He
very
is.
kind, and that's just that's a gift, and I think that's something that I guess I would like to honor. Now that he's not here, I'll talk about him positively. I want to give him a big head.
Right.
The
So
bishop.
Pastor Dan,
His bishop hat won't
Oh yeah,
fit.
that's forgot. That's one of the titles. Is bishop.
That's coming up in this episode.
That's right. So one of the things about this last episode and even this episode is most of it is serious conversation in these 2 episodes. In our previous episodes, we get to some portion of the conversation where it's a little bit more lighthearted. And of course, scattered throughout these talks with Pastor Dan, there's some lighthearted moments and some sarcasm and some funny things, but for the most part, we're talking about some serious matters and things, and it's good. I appreciate that, but we just don't get to some of the fun parts that we normally do.
Are you trying to talk him out of listening to this?
No, I'm just trying to give this disclaimer so that they'll come back and watch episode 5.
Yeah, well, if you're looking forward to the zany stuff, you'll have to wait. We'll have the Animaniacs on episode 5.
Yes.
Do you remember that song?
Yeah. Well, I do. I don't think.
Animaniacs.
Yeah, they don't want me to sing it, but we want you to sing it.
We want to watch the Animaniacs show. It's really good.
What are we doing tonight, Pinky?
The same thing we do every night.
Yeah.
Try to take over the world. Do you guys not remember that? There. Now it has some frivolous stuff.
Pop culture reference.
There you go. Yeah, we're cool.
There you have it.
If you say you're cool, you are. That's a rule.
That's the
That's the
that
rule.
seems to be the rule in our
The more
culture.
you say you're cool, the more cool you are. Because you're not cool unless you have to tell people.
Please enjoy this rest of our conversation with Pastor Dan Scott, Bishop Dan Scott, Dr. Dan Scott, whatever it is. He just doesn't want to be called late for dinner. All right.
Oh my God. That's,
Sorry,
See,
I had to
he's
throw in
cool
the-
too.
Yeah, old person
he's going to
joke.
get a sign that says he's funny. I'm funny.
All right, enjoy.
People will
Side
stream-
note, I just saw the other day that Tennessee got a rating of an F
Yeah.
on social distancing.
That's because people in Tennessee are not going to have anybody tell them what to do, no matter what. They should have said, "I want everybody to go out and just pack the malls." And
then they would have got the result. they
yeah,
wanted.
yeah, because
First time I've heard a psychologist say reverse psychology word. I always thought that was just a
Just in
joke.
Tennessee,
Just in
just
Tennessee.
or in the South.
yeah, just that's right. So what was I saying before?
What were we? We were. We'll get there. What was that?
Yeah,
No. It was good.
We'll edit this part.
What did you just?
no, that's okay. People probably like that part
We
the
had
best.
talked about awareness. Then you had said, "Oh God."
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to, we were talking about we have to becoming aware of oneself. That's and
think we
how one is wired. We were
Yeah,
talking about
we
that.
had talked about that. Well, here, let me ask you this question because
I think we're experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder
right now.
right
This,
now.
Is, this is how we're working it out. On a different video, you said, and I love. There's 2 quotes that I took from that video that I just loved. It's not our past that determines who we are; it's
Yeah.
our imagined future.
Right.
And I wonder how that plays into some of the stress that we're feeling. Right. 'Cause
That's
it's-
great. Yeah, because if we here, let's say our nation right now and much of the Western world is hit with 2 major disasters, and whichever one we deal with harms the other. So we have a pandemic where lots of people can get really sick. My brother got COVID in his family, and so I know that's a real thing, and we really worried about him for many days. But then we have the economic
Right.
chaos that's caused by quarantining and so forth. People lean one way or the other usually on which one must be addressed the most. But the fact is, an elected official doesn't have the luxury of dealing with one or dealing with the other. We're dealing with both, and so we're pulled in between these things. So if your imagined future is I'm going to die, or my loved ones are going to die. I have friends that are in nursing home, my elderly parents, grandparents, maybe me, heard about this child that got killed, my child. And if that's your imagined future, you're going to stay in stress. Also, if you have a Pollyanna kind of view that this isn't real and it's going to blow over and then we're going to go back to our economic life, everything's going to be the same, then you're not going to be resilient to those bumps that come.
Right.
So it's somewhere, I would say, you're err more toward the hopeful future. That's what Scripture gives us. Ultimately, things are going to turn out well because there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth wherein dwells all righteousness. Mm-hmm. So the Christian has a long view to where this is all going to turn out well. My life may not turn out well, but my eternal future is going to turn out well. And that hope tends to infuse into probably my life's going to be better than not ahead. And so you're not the kind of optimist that's like, I'm not going to hear anything about any kind of sickness anywhere or any economic distress or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's a real thing, but my hope is in the eternal God who knows my end from the beginning And just like right now, I've been for almost 2 months not being this close to anybody. This is the first
Well,
day.
even you walked in the door earlier, and I was, keeping my distance from you. Normally we would have like shook hands or hugged or something like that. And even when we started this, we sat down here.
Yeah.
I said, "Are you okay with being this close?" And
My anxiety is not a 0, but it's not a 10.
that's the
it's-
first person someone has actually told me to my face that they have a little anxiety by sitting next to me.
I do. Yeah. That's new, but
Right? Yeah.
it's probably, I don't know, if I was, it might be a 3. I mean, it's kind of like
Sure.
there. But also, I'm telling myself, I don't have, what kind of life is it if I'm in my house the rest of my life? I've got things to do, and I'm not going to just rush out I'm not going to go to a theater tomorrow where I'm sitting with everybody or a sports event. But I've got to re-enter life, and so I'm going to manage this level of anxiety, and I'm going to push myself to enter in. And if tomorrow I find out, that I'm dealing with COVID, I'm not going to feel bad at myself that
You'll
I
blame
took
me.
the risk. I will.
Well, if he
And
finds out
and
tomorrow,
that will
we
help me
got it
deal with
from
my
him.
own feelings.
Right. There you go.
I'm like JD didn't tell me.
JD, it's all about that.
He's a pastor. He should have known better.
should have known. He
He
should have
walked
known
with
should have
God
had.
and everything.
I should have had all the answers.
If you don't have all the answers,
If
you're
he
not a
walked
good
with God,
pastor.
he would have known. He would have had foreknowledge about this. He
Right.
didn't, so he's not.
That's
That's
how it
simple.
works. Did you dream any dreams?
Dream any dreams.
About
You don't
this?
want to know the dreams
I
that
don't.
I've had.
No.
I don't.
No, we have too many so-called
There's
prophets.
COVID dreams,
COVID dreams. Another quote you said concerning the stress, you were talking about Christians wear your mask. If we've been asked to wear a mask, wear a mask. And you said,
I got convicted by that, by the way.
this quote right here is great. He said, you said, we should calm the fears of others because you have an abundance of charity. Mm-hmm. And I thought that is a completely different message than what we're hearing out there right now. Right now, the debate is, whether it's safe or not, whether it's a real thing or it's not, whether I'm tough and macho and or I have so much faith I have, I can handle snakes and drink COVID, and then you have like the opposite side. But I haven't heard it expressed as no, calm the fears of the other people out there, because the people out there that maybe maybe you're on the side of like I don't have to wear a mask, okay, but your brother or sister, or even not brother and sister, just another fellow human, is stressing out bad.
Yeah.
And and it's kind of like, why not just be charitable to them? Wear a mask when you go out in public, calm their fears. We could have been doing masks right now. You could have been calming Pastor Dan's fears right now.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm very inconsiderate.
You are. We have.
I think like if you had, say, an elderly mother that's afraid, and let's say you think her fears were really, because my mother passed away this past year, but the last 3 or 4 years she got all worked up, all the stuff on the internet, and she was afraid all the time. She would have been terrified with this. Mm-hmm. So if I'd have gone to see her, I'd have worn a mask and been. I wouldn't. She would have wanted me to come to see her, but she would have been afraid. So I would have sit away from her with a mask and say, "I'm sorry, I'm not hugging you right now." And she might cry and say, "I wish I could hug you," But she would be comforted by my presence and also comforted that I was keeping my distance.
Yeah.
And whatever I thought, whether this was real, not real, whatever, for her sake, I would wear a mask. So this is where a Christian especially has to ask not just first what are my rights and what are not my rights and who can tell me what to do and not. It's like, how can I bear my brother or sister's burdens in a reasonable way, not play into their fears, but at the same time give some degree of security and comfort to them. Nothing is lost to me by doing that.
Absolutely.
It's like the meat to idols thing. It's the stumbling block question. Like, why? If it causes your brother to stumble, don't do it. It
Yeah.
doesn't hurt you to get your meat from somewhere else tonight, so to speak. And the same thing goes for why. Like I know many pastors won't drink alcohol out of the house. I'm not saying that's the right answer, but that's an option. It's because they don't want someone from the congregation to see them drinking alcohol and think that they're responsible, which is, of course, more a problem with with our parishioners, so to speak, than it is with the pastor. But there's a level, wherever that level is, of being responsible. Don't drink around other people. When I invite people over to my house first time, I'll ask them, do you drink alcohol? How do
Yeah.
you feel about that? And if they say they have no problem, drink alcohol if you want to.
Romans 14.
There you go. So
Absolutely. And that principle carries in all kinds of ways. And, the way I'm wondering if this is a sideline, if that's not what happened with the Apostle Peter and Paul when Paul said, I rebuke Peter to his face. I think he was a younger generation believer and new to the faith relatively. And what Peter was doing when the Jewish people came, he didn't eat the bacon, not because he was a hypocrite, because he was a seasoned minister of the gospel. He may have wanted to welcome his Jewish brothers in a way that didn't make them feel uncomfortable because he was a leader.
Right.
That's a possible interpretation of that passage as well. And so I think in this, if I was somewhere and I knew of a family that was really worried about me having a glass of wine, and they were at a dinner where I was with friends that knew that I would drink wine, I might say something like, I'm not going to have wine tonight. I'm going to miss it, but I'm not going to because I'm working with this family. They worry about that. But I would also tell the people, I don't have a problem drinking, and I know that maybe you wouldn't be mad at me if I did, but it might hurt you in some way. It might. So I'm just, honesty can coexist with charity.
That's good.
well, that goes back to what you said. You can say in this situation, I'm not going to drink wine, but don't pretend like that's the norm. Like we had talked about that earlier. Don't pretend that I always speak this way, or I always dress this way, or I always act this way. The fact of the matter is, if more people were honest, I like beer. I don't do it. I don't drink beer with my friends who have had substance abuse issues. I don't drink beer with my friends who feel like they shouldn't. That's wise not to, but I don't see a problem with that. And if everyone was just honest about that and we had grace towards those different opinions, we wouldn't have to hide it. We wouldn't have to pretend.
Well, let's, right now I've been taking care of a little Baptist church that's without a pastor. So I've been filling in, I've been doing the social media thing with them, but I was going to actually the church. Well, I'm a charismatic and I'm an Anglican. So there's certain sacramental things I might do in certain, settings. And also charismatic things, like if I felt like I had a word from God that come over me suddenly, like a word of knowledge or something, or I felt kind of the impulse to pray in tongues, it's not charitable to do that without some translation. They know my background. They knew when they asked me, but there's some trust that I'm not going to all of a sudden just whoop and run down the middle of the aisle in the middle of the sermon at a Baptist church and jump over a pew, or do those things, that maybe in a charismatic church that people would kind of laugh and say, "Well, that was kind of over the top," but it's okay, because it's very disruptive.
Right.
And one thing, if I think that these parts of my Christian expression have any value at all, they have to be worn in a way that people see that they have added to the molding of my life in a way that's winsome, and they hunger after it, and they want to know more. Then people can approach you and say, can we have a conversation that would not be offensive to you if you talk about X, because I've been always afraid of X. I've been taught you shouldn't do X. But I've noticed in you that this kind of comes out different. Would you just talk to me about that? You want to get to that moment. And that's what charity does, and forbearing, pulling one's own desires back a bit. There's nothing lost by that. It's charity.
Yeah, I don't know that, and I'm totally blaming my current pastor for this, but I don't know that we've talked a lot about charity. I don't mean that. I'm just joking. But for real, I feel like we talk about grace, forgiving people for what they did, or letting them get away with certain amount of offense or whatever. And then we talk about generosity when it comes to money. But in terms of charity and how we act charitably, I don't feel like that's necessarily something that I've noticed a lot of talking about that. There's a lot less of that in the divisive culture that we live in right now in terms of charity and empathy. But even separate from empathy, just charity, just saying, you know what, I don't really know why you're acting that way. So it's not empathy. It's just, I'm not going to respond to that. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. We don't see that. And we tend to have these very hard lines. And even people that I know don't believe in those hard lines, they have to keep those lines because that's what their church expects them to do. And that's pastors. I know pastors of Baptist churches in this area. You guys can all start, asking everybody, do you believe this? Who exercise spiritual gifts.
Sure.
Filled with the Spirit. But
Sure.
they can't possibly do it. One pastor I know, when he is starting to feel the Holy Spirit and he wants to start praying in tongues, then he walks off the stage, does it behind the stage, and then comes back out and pretends like he didn't because his congregation expects him not to. And I'm just like, where's the charity there? Do you not like him now? Do you not trust him? He's the same person.
We can do this in political life too. So if we have
Yeah.
family and friends that suddenly are going like full tilt in a direction that we just don't agree with, our blood pressure will rise and we will feel tense. But if we'll take some breaths, let's suppose that there may be reason for that outburst that's not apparent. It may not even be political. And if we can just stop and take it in and make ourselves say, I didn't know you had that opinion, but I'm interested. Tell me why. When did this start developing, and why? What? And many times you'll hear a story that will move you, and you don't even have to give your opinion. The person may not be ready to hear it, but if you know them well, you can say, my opinion's different than that. I don't know if you want to hear it, but we can't get there until we've heard them. And sometimes the healing that we offer people is to listen to their opinion without response. In any way, we might say, well, that's not my opinion, but I think I've learned more about why people have that opinion, and I thank you for it. Almost everybody will respond to that. Like, wow, you don't share my opinion? No, I don't. Could I have another cup of coffee? If we could do that, for a lot of people, that in itself's healing because like, wow, you mean I can be heard? So when we're having discussion about differences, almost always it's not a discussion. It's a mutual monologue. You speak, I'm mad.
Right.
I speak, you're mad. My turn to speak. Because while you're speaking, I'm thinking about how I'm going to speak against what you've just spoken. Bang, bang, bang,
Right.
bang, bang. And
We're not
we
really
never
taking
touch
the
one.
time to truly respond to what one another's saying. We're just deciding, well, this is what I'm going to say now.
Yeah, I tell you what, when the thing about gay marriage was being discussed in the state of Tennessee, and I'll deal with that in the country for that matter. I was going to preach a sermon. I did preach a sermon on why that I did not believe in same-sex marriage. I knew some people in my congregation that struggled with same-sex attraction, and I wrote the sermon out a week ahead of time and sent it to them and asked them to critique it for its spirit. The shocking thing about that sermon, it had 30,000 downloads. So obviously it hit a nerve. I wept through that sermon because I was looking at some people who had sons and daughters who had themselves had issues like that, and I knew them to be godly people that were walking uprightly before the Lord, even though sometimes they slip up. And they were walking the same journey I'm walking. And I knew I was causing them pain and distress. Sometimes that's unavoidable. But it is your attitude is avoidable. You don't have to raise your voice and hammer at somebody. A
Right.
prophetic word does not have to be an injuring word. To where you satisfy your colleagues tomorrow by saying, I gave it to them, you know. And so what the pushback I had, one of the leaders of gay issues in the city wrote me the next day and said, I heard your sermon. I obviously disagree with it. But he said, I could listen to that opinion because I knew you weren't trying to harm me. Could we discuss this? Whereas some of my Christian friends were saying, you know, yeah, you took the stand, but it looked like you were regretting taking the stand. So I don't know if I can even trust you. That's, you know, so what they wanted was blood on the ground.
Right.
Right.
And charity, which is the kind of the Latin version of agape, so that's just caritas is the Latin translation of agape. So that's where we get the word charity. Often doesn't mean that to us in our culture, but agape is about I'm going to enter that other person's world the best I'm humanly capable, like God entered my world, not holding my trespasses against me, and loved me while I was unlovable. He loved me too much to leave me in my sin, but he loved me enough to come to me while I was yet in my sin. We have to walk that walk the best we're capable of doing.
Yeah, and you said we have to let them talk, and I just wondered how many people might be going like, why do we have to let someone else talk? And the answer came to my mind almost as quickly as the question did. I remember the love and respect guy. He said when the wife and the husband are having an argument, you know, someone's got to go first, and he said whoever's the most mature goes first, and that just stuck with me, and that kind of goes to this too. Whoever is the most mature is going to let the other person give their opinion and hear them out. And so it's kind of like it's not necessarily a debate who gets to go first. Why does someone else get to tell their opinion? If you have that attitude, you're not the most mature. And so our goal is to be more mature. And I think that is a sign of maturity to be able to say, I'm going to let you express yourself, and I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to try to understand you. And if you would like to hear back what my opinion is, I'll do it. Unfortunately, like you said, it's hard to please people.
I knew a mental health worker colleague years ago that we would be out at lunch. He asked me, would I not say grace over my meal when he was present? That's big. And always making these comments about preachers and churches and like had an attitude.
And this was a mental health professional?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And so when I was out, I would just keep it to myself, blessing my meal and so forth. My right was, I can ask the blessing from meal any time, and I don't have to put up with that. Time went on, and I was paired with this person to do a group thing, and we were co-facilitating a group. And one day we went out to lunch, just the two of us. And it's after the first time I learned he had been abused by a pastor sexually. And he thanked me for never asking grace and all that. And then he broke down and cried, and he said, I guess I'm a jerk. And I wept and said, you're not a jerk, you just hurt. What if I had insisted on my right? I would have never gotten there. And the day came when he slipped in the back of our church on the back row and did that time and time again. It won't always work. We don't do it because it works. We do it because it's love. And there's, sometimes the right thing to do is take a stand and say, no, I say grace over my meal. That's what I do. That's where I think the leadership of the Holy Spirit comes in mind. It's not a hard and fast rule, but we have to take this in and think, is this a moment where strong words are called for, or is that just my temper coming out and I've got to have my way? Or is this a time when I need to pull back and find a way to that person's heart by showing the ability to take it rather than to lash back? We don't always know, and we'll make mistakes too, but we have to seek God inside when those things come up.
It's somewhat similar to the situation that we faced here during this pandemic of churches, whether we are deciding to meet or not. You know, we've heard the stories over the weeks of the churches that had went ahead and said, you know, we're going to go ahead and move forward, and we're going to do this. And of course, we early on in the deal, we know about the choir that met, and then they ended up having some choir members that contracted the virus and passed away. And then we heard about the pastor in Virginia. The same thing happened with him. And it was this, well, by God, it's our right, and, you know, separation of church and state, and we're just, you know, mad and angry about it. And then there's others who are on the other side of the fence, and the other, you know, way over here. There's ditches on either side of the road. But the thing that a lot of us are trying to, as church leaders, are trying to navigate through is not just what the actual problem is. Okay, what are the figures that we're getting from the White House? What are the figures that we're getting from the governor's mansion? Okay, that talks about what the problem really is. But then there's the perception of the problem in the community. Mm-hmm. And that is a wide range of the people on this side of the ditch and people on this side of the ditch. And so we're trying to be charitable as church leaders of going, okay, Holy Spirit, what is it that you have for us to do? And each church is in some slightly different situation. There's a church just down the street from this house who they've already opened up, and I don't know what their policies are. I don't know what their procedures are for when you come onto their property. They may have thought through this very well, and they're doing things very well. I have no idea. I'm assuming. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they are. That they've already opened up with one Sunday, and then there's some that are getting ready to. And then, you know, every church is in different situation depending on what they're like. For us, for Siege Church, which we talk about church a lot, but I don't really plug the church in this podcast. But in our church, we're a portable church, and so like many other portable churches in this area, we have different resources and we have different circumstances rather than, you know, the 10,000 member church down the road who last night had an outdoor service, which I think is fabulous. And someone that's in our church who's a reporter he went to the service, and he's, you know, observing and reporting, and he's going to write about it. And so I'm texting my friend who's the reporter, saying, hey, tell me, what are they doing? Like, what can we learn from of how they're doing things that maybe, you know, we can enact when we go back to having corporate gatherings again? Mm-hmm. Because we do want to consider. And then we want to be charitable toward people. And but, you know, there's this concern of like having to appease both like people on both sides of the ditch.
There are extremists on both sides that you'll never appease no matter what you do, because some people are wired to, if you do not check off every box of 10 boxes they have, 9 won't do, then you're the enemy. And those people, there's not a lot you can do about. But let's just say, okay, you're going to regather and you figured a way to regather. One thing we can do is say to people, if this is too soon for you, and rather than saying, and if you're afraid and you can't come, now that's like you have a spirit of fear, so you can't come. I understand that you're not as, you don't have as much faith as we do. But you can escape that by just saying, if you are vulnerable, if you're in a vulnerable position, and you have issues to where if you contracted this virus, you're likely to not do well, or you have loved ones that do and you're worried about taking it to them, please watch the streaming. And you're just as much part of us, and we love you. And if we can serve you in any way, and take a few weeks and think it through. In the meantime, some of us are going to meet and we're going to do X.
Yeah.
And it's like some of us feel called to meet, some of us feel called not to meet right now. We're going to let the Lord decide which one of His people He wants to do each. And we're going to just kind of
Yeah.
stay together in the bond of peace. It's not meeting or not meeting right now. It's about us just staying together, whether we feel called to meet or not. When we put things in that way, then it allows a person to make up their own mind and exercise their own judgment. We're ahead of the game than when we use language that says, if you really had faith in God, you'd do this, or if you really loved your neighbors yourself, you wouldn't be doing that.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, it's not good language. Maybe in the early days of it, when the government was telling us don't meet and people are going to meet anyway, that's just rebellion. Spirit of rebellion, there's nothing you can say about
Right.
it but that. Today, we're in a different position, and the same thing is not holding. Some people are beginning to open up and they're meeting and they have reasons for meeting. Some people feel like it's not right for them yet, and we're all going to have to find our own way on that.
Yeah, I sent a very similar message to the church yesterday. And I basically, in this video message I sent, was saying, hey, as we're phasing back into, again, normal life, regular life, you might observe some people doing something that you don't personally have peace about. And I said, that's fine. That's totally okay. That's their life. That's how they're going to conduct themselves. Hopefully it's according to the law. But even if it's according to the law and you don't have peace about it for yourself, follow the peace that the Holy Spirit is bearing witness with you into your own spirit. And it's okay that it's different.
Yeah, and here's another thing. My father's 86, and he's in good shape. He's healthy and all, but he's alone in a house. I've thought about going to get him. He's in St. Louis. My sister lives a few blocks away, and she sees him about every day. But I've thought about going in and bring him. If my father was here, I would not be here doing this.
Right, yes, yeah. We could do it over on Skype.
Yeah, because
or
I would
Zoom.
think I have another level of awareness here. I don't need to take the tent. My dad would be the other way. He'd like, just go over and we'll be fine.
Sure.
But he's also like, okay, I'm not going to see anybody. You told me not to. I'm not doing it. I'm okay. And he told my sisters, Dan told me not to go anywhere, not to go to the grocery store or nothing, that y'all got to do all that for me. And they like, that's right. So, well, if that's what he thinks, that's what we'll do. So he can put it on me, but that's okay. But knowing that, we people are in different places because they
Yeah,
have different circumstances.
One of the things that I think we don't value enough is having friends who have different opinions than you. And so when you say, go with what the Holy Spirit tells you, so many times the Holy Spirit seems to tell you something different than he seems to tell me. And we're all 100% certain that the Holy Spirit is talking to us. In those times, and this is one of those times, it might be better to get out of your box, of your silo of friends that are all telling you exactly the same thing, and have a conversation with someone who's wise and maybe looks at it a little bit differently, because that expected or imagined future, it might not be based on reality. There might be
that's true.
some misinformation that you have, and just merely having a conversation with someone wise, someone who has more information, or even just another peer of yours. I'm not talking about find someone that's better, or more intelligent, or anything like that, but just someone who has a different opinion, and talk through it instead of talk at each other, but talk through it and say, this is why we're opening. This is what we're going to do to be safe about it. This is this. My mom texted me last night and said, the news is saying Nashville's having a huge breakout and we're all going to die. And she didn't say that part, but so I looked it up. Man, Nashville has 3,000 cases in less than 100 people dead total. In Murfreesboro, we have just a few hundred cases and I think 20 deaths. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at that and you hear the news about New York or something, obviously that's significantly worse. But it's putting the threat into reality, into a concrete thing. That helps me. I mean, I know that there are more cases out there that are not reported because they don't have symptoms or whatever. But if you look at our area and you say, okay, a couple hundred people in all of central Tennessee, important people that matter. So I'm not trying to sweep that under the rug, but in the bigger scheme of things, you've got 7 million people in Tennessee, and you only have, this very small percentage of people that are impacted. That's not the same as the amount of fear that we're putting into it sometimes.
No, and and thinking through clearly like that, trying to get the polemics out of your head and thinking it through. Like, for example, I was talking to my wife. It may be that as things were ratcheting up in New York and we social distance, lots of people that were carriers went ahead and either showed symptoms or didn't symptoms, but they're no longer contagious. And now they're coming back into circulation. We may be rubbing shoulders with them all the time. And had we met them without the social quarantining, we may have gotten the virus.
Right.
But now we're not going to get it because they've already worked through that and they're not contagious anymore. We do not know if this has slowed it down so much that it's nearly extinguished in places like ours, or if our day of reckoning is coming. We don't know that yet. So some caution without hysteria, and just watching carefully is probably the way to do it. And the extremes won't allow us to do either if we listen to
Oh,
them.
right. Yeah.
Right.
They'd like some are like stay in your house, never come out again, and others it's like go to the ball game and we better kind of
Start licking doorknobs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Prove you're an American. Don't wear a mask.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the tyrants. I see that. I'm like, what? There's some stuff. Don't misunderstand. Since the last time we met, we talked about this like a month ago, and we're like, guys, this is not against churches. Now there has been some stuff since then that you kind of do have to wonder, how come 200 people can go to Home Depot, but 10 people can't go to church? And so there's some questions there that are legitimate questions. And some states seem to have incredibly odd rules that don't seem to make a lot of sense. Our state is not one of those states. So it comes down to comfort level, but, and again, asking God, but also asking people.
Yeah, and there's one thing too that Christians need to realize: a secular person that's never been raised around church, and we have entire regions of the country that's almost entirely secularized as a culture. They're not usually hostile at churches. They just don't even take into account. It'd be like me, if I heard that all the pool halls were closed in the country and are going to be closed for 6 months, it doesn't bother me. I don't play pool.
Right.
And I grew up not playing pool, and it's like, they'll get over it. But somebody that's their whole frame of reference, and they do that, and they make a living, or that's where they get their socialization and everything, then they would just think I'm a jerk for not caring. Mm-hmm. And that's the way people look at our churches. So sometimes we have to say, well, they're wrong in how they're judging how important this is to my life. But it's not because they're antichrist or they want to blow up the church. They have not had an encounter with Christ to where they understand how important it is to gather together as a family of God. But I think, particularly in the South, you don't have to be a Christian to go to church. You don't have to be a Christian to be a deacon. You don't have to be a Christian to run a church. It's just you have to be a Southerner. And by God, I'm a Christian. It's so. So you do. I got a story. I'll tell you the story. This is a great story.
Okay.
So I'm in West Virginia watching TV years ago, and they had the May Day parade, which is on first, and used to be in May Day. It was first day. As labor people, this goes way back, that there were significant Bolshevik kind of left-leaning kind of folks, and it was not among the elite back then. It was coal miners and people that were really being abused, and we didn't know all that was about to happen in the world. So there was a lot of that. So that they had communist parade, kind of people would be kind of and then they'd walk down Main Street, Anyway, so they were going to have, I think this was the last one. And so the reporter was there, and I'm watching on TV, and the reporter gets this guy, and he's got this, miner's helmet on, and he's missing some teeth, and he's got a big stick. And she said, well, sir, where are you from? Well, he said, well, I'm from the mountains. And she said, is that right? She said, well, what brings you to Charleston today? Well, I wanted to see the communists walk down the street. And she said, well, yeah. He said, oh, you, all right, why you got this big stick? Well, I hope to hit a communist with one. And she said, well, why do you want to do that? He said, well, hell, woman, they don't even believe in God.
But me hitting them over the head with a stick
That's
is going to
tradition.
make it change.
So I'm like, there is the epitome of Southern religion right there. And so we have to kind of flesh out on where following Jesus and being faithful to him and where the cultural Christianity, they overlap, but they're not the same thing.
Right.
Exactly.
You'll have to edit that, I guess.
No, you
No.
can leave it in there.
That'll be up to our wives.
No, I call that Americanity. And it's this like, I look at it a little bit different because I don't have the stories from West Virginia. I'm from California. And so what I see
You have
is-
different stories.
I have different stories where Christianity is basically achieving the American dream, getting a house, getting ahead materialistically, and getting the things that you want, and that's it's like a little bit different, but you completely conflated the two things, the materialistic goal of life, and then you just use the words. It's like when they take a book and make it into a movie. You know, they've got the title of the movie and the book match, but everything else is different. Have you had that experience? World War Z.
Yeah, sure.
You said you just watched World War Z. World War Z was like that. It was terrible. It was like not even close to the book, which I enjoyed very much. And
What book was that?
World War Z. Yeah, sorry. Now we're going to get into geek stuff.
It's about zombies.
It's about zombies. And I'm so mad that they did the zombies wrong.
I zoned out on the way.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Anyways, but it's take the characters and do it. It's you know, it's sometimes we do that with Christian characters too, and we say like if you took a character and you gave him a fedora and a whip and you said he was fighting Nazis, who would you say that is? No, who would you say that is? A fedora, a whip. He seeks after treasure. He fights against Nazis.
Yeah. Indiana Jones.
John the Baptist.
Oh, okay.
Right? John the Baptist. That's what we do with Christian stories and movies sometimes. Is
Right.
we just take the accoutrement. I don't even know how to say that word. But you take the outward appearance and the names and the words, and then you fill it with something completely different. And we do that opposite in Christianity. We'll take the things that we want from the world and we'll fill it with some Christian words, and somehow that'll make it Christian.
We normally kind of end our time chatting about a movie or something of that nature, but and we probably still will do that. But Pastor Dan has been here for a while. He's got time commitments. We're going to let him go. We're going to free him. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
you mentioned one of the other things that you're part of. You know, you're Pentecostal or charismatic and also Anglican. So that reminded me, one of your titles is bishop. That we could have, Bishop
what?
Scott. Yeah, he's for real.
That explains why this conversation went at a weird angle.
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't have the hat.
Yeah,
If you hadn't had the
we were
hat.
missing the hat.
Please bring the hat next time.
One of the things I wanted to discuss with you, we won't get to it here, but maybe we'll have you back on another episode. We talk about movies. Is the movie Bernie?
Oh yeah, I love it. I
Oh,
love
these
that movie.
two with their freaking Bernies, man.
I introduced the movie to Scott and his family a while ago, maybe over a year ago.
Yeah.
And they just don't have the same appreciation that you and
okay.
I have for
No,
it.
it speaks to what we were talking earlier about kind of our cultural Christianity as opposed to,
It does speak to that.
where's the line? We don't know.
So we'll get to that maybe in another time. But thank you so much. I've appreciated this time very much, and I hope that our listeners or watchers have as well.
We might get more viewers because we have such a celebrity, a bishop.
Well,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
a bishop.
We'll just advertise it.
Bishop, doctor, pastor, brother. That should be on your business
That's a
card.
lot.
Yeah.
Counselor.
Yeah, sarcasm doesn't become you.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for everyone for watching and listening to Everyone Else Has a Podcast.